Good afternoon, everyone. Magandang tanghali sa inyo. Sa Tagalog. Isa dapat anyang saya?
Yes.
Pwede na. And ni hao and sawadee ka. Of course, for my Vietnamese, good afternoon. Alright, again, my name is Arvin DIESMOS. I'll be talking about taxonomy, the science of taxonomy, and of course natural history collections. But first, allow me to say a huge thank you to the organizers, Professor Kwon, thank you so much. It's great to see you again, Miss July, Prof. Vic, and Dr. Rico of Circa, and all of the organizers of this IES2026. And I wish to thank all of these institutions for providing information and data. I wish to thank several people here who helped me put together the information that I'll be sharing with you today. And I wish to, well, this is the title of my talk. My name is Arvin DIESMOS. You can call me Arvin. I'm with the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, and I'm also affiliated with all of these institutions. And I wish to dedicate this presentation to our students, undergrad and graduate students. That's impressive. All right. My presentation is has 3 parts, actually 4 parts, and I will do my best to finish it in 30 minutes. Let me begin by telling you that Southeast Asia, in our region of this world, is one of the most biodiverse regions in the world, and it's a region of superlatives. And with such a small land area, but it has one of the most diverse species, biodiversity in the world. About a quarter of the known species in the world are found here in Southeast Asia. Again, Southeast Asia is composed of 11 countries now, and they form the group called ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And there are quite a good number of species here, both flora and fauna, that are found only in the region. Examples are, you find in this slide, both flora and fauna. Species endemicity, all right? Species endemicity for the region is also quite high. It ranges from about 10% of the known species to as high as 85%. And the powerhouses are countries like Indonesia, Philippines, in terms of species endemicity. The region also has extremely rich marine biodiversity. For example, the Coral Triangle, if you've heard of it, especially young people, is the richest region in the world in terms of coral reef biodiversity. And again, the region you will find so many diverse ecosystems, different forest formations that are also quite unique. Many of which are quite unique to the region, and many of which also are quite highly threatened. In terms of terrestrial vertebrate biodiversity, there are now about 6,000 species known. Again, these are birds or mammals, amphibians or reptiles. There are about 6,000 species known, but definitely many more new species are being discovered from this region. Again, the superpowers are Indonesia and Philippines in terms of numbers, but also in terms of endemicity, these 2 countries, along with Thailand and Malaysia, are have quite high levels of species that are only found in those countries, right? Please do remember that term, endemicity. And all of these biodiversity studies have contributed to establishing the known natural parks or nature parks or protected areas in the region, of which there are now about 2,400 protected areas of various types in the region. Terrestrial protected areas about 1,700, and marine is slowly catching up, with about 700. And I wish to also mention, to emphasize that there are about 70 ASEAN heritage parks. These are AHPs, or these are your equivalent. This is the regional equivalent to the World Heritage Sites, right? AHPs. Now, for part 2, I'll be focusing on taxonomy and why it is important. Wisdom begins by naming things by their right names, and that's how basically how taxonomy, the field of science, operates, and it centers on classification, identification, and naming of organisms. And the science of taxonomy is quite fundamental. It's a foundational element in terms of biodiversity data, and it's very important, especially now, being a foundational element for global commitments such as the Sustainable Development Goals or the Global Biodiversity Framework. In fact, many of the goals in these global commitments, are founded on basic taxonomy. Again, knowing the right names of species and ecosystems as well. And in terms of biodiversity, those that describe biodiversity are taxonomists. Again, this underpins the very importance, the crucial work of taxonomy and taxonomists in biodiversity research, and of course, and also in conservation. Again, you cannot pinpoint all of these natural parks, nature reserves, protected areas, without the work of biodiversity specialists. I wish to also mention in the Philippines the work of taxonomists by researchers, scientists of all kinds, and ecologists, conservation biologists, and so on, have also led to identifying the most important areas for biodiversity conservation. In the Philippines, there are now about 2,500 known protected areas. And it is one of the, in terms of numbers, it's one of the highest number in Southeast Asia. But of course, taxonomists, along with other experts in the fields of ecology, conservation, geography, and many others, provide the sound science for policymakers to identify the most pressing conservation issues on ecosystems and species on a national or on a regional scope. You were aware of the red lists, threatened species, and so on. And basic science, basic taxonomy is actually crucial in providing the foundation for these kinds of conservation assessments, like the IUCN red listing, to assess again the conservation of species and even of ecosystems. Now, I wish to emphasize why. In the following slides, we did some initial analysis on how taxonomy compares with those from the work of taxonomists from the region and from outside of the region, especially in other parts of Asia or North America or in Europe. I'm going to be focusing on amphibians and reptiles, or herpetology, because herpetology is my specialization when I was still young, when I was still starting. Just to show you again the importance of the work of taxonomists in Southeast Asia, in this region, in the last nearly 40 years, there have been a tremendous number of species that have been discovered. The total number runs to about close to about 2,000 new species of amphibians and reptiles have been found in the region in the last 34, 36 years. And many of these species were found, as expected, in countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. But but definitely other countries in Southeast Asia, especially when the work of biodiversity surveys and taxonomy has increased, we are expecting to find many more novel species from these countries. It's the same for amphibians as well, but this time for reptiles as well. But this time, in terms of reptile discovery, numbers of new species of reptiles, Vietnam is the first in terms of discoveries of new species, and followed by the Philippines, and then Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on. Again, we expect that taxonomists they believe that many more species will be found in many areas of these 11 countries in Southeast Asia, especially when many habitats, different kinds of habitats, have been studied as well. Or if the surveys are done in different seasons as well. And in this graph, I want to show you how taxonomists and those publishing taxonomic papers compare between taxonomists from Southeast Asia, right, and outside Southeast Asia, especially Europe and North America. We are actually, the science of herpetology is actually being dominated by herpetologists from outside of Southeast Asia. In terms of productivity and studies that are being led by foreign scientists, Southeast Asian scientists are not really faring well. Like in the past 36 years, only about 30% of the papers published and discoveries were authored by Southeast Asians, compared to 70% for non-Southeast Asians. This is for amphibians, but it's the same story for reptiles as well. So in short, we are really being dominated by herpetologists coming outside of this region. Now, if I focus on the Philippines alone, the situation, really is quite dire. Many people from outside the Philippines, especially those scientists from Europe and North America, even Asia, Japan, Korea, China, they are more productive compared with Philippine taxonomists. Again, in terms of amphibians, again, those studying amphibians, or even reptiles. So you can see the tiniest person there are the Filipino authors of taxonomic papers on amphibians or reptiles. That's why we really need, this country, the Philippines, needs to really invest, to increase the number of homegrown taxonomists. Just to show you how we fare in terms of other groups. Again, if we look at different groups of animals, from amphibians to ants, to dragonflies, to mammals, freshwater crabs. There are still a lot of unrecognized species, meaning these are really novel species that will be discovered. Again, based on estimates of models and patterns of discoveries in many groups of species, both plants and animals in the Philippines. However, if you look at homegrown Filipino taxonomists, it's the picture is really quite alarming, because for many of the major groups of plants, or even of animals, and even for many groups of plants, there are really very few number of homegrown, Filipino taxonomists doing the work, and this needs to change now. If you look at the speciescape in the country, again, those images represent the major groups, flora, mammals, birds, and so on, marine fish. The Filipino taxonomists are, really microscopic. So there's a huge disparity, in terms of having the right kind of specialization and the work that is needed to really describe our own biodiversity, not only in the Philippines but in the entire Southeast Asian region. And our analysis showed that there are three major reasons why Filipinos especially are being left behind in terms of the field of taxonomy, species discoveries, and so on. One is, the most important thing is funding sources. The available funding sources in the country are very limited when you are focusing on taxonomy or species surveys or biotic surveys. There are quite limited funding available for that, or even scarce sources of funding to do such work. Number two, natural history collections are typically deposited in museum institutions in countries outside of the origin of species, meaning many of the specimens in Southeast Asia, you will find them not within institutions in Southeast Asia, but outside. I think it's really different in Korea or Japan or in China, where your institutions, your NHMCs, Natural History Museums, institutions, they have the sufficient resources to maintain such natural history collections. So in Southeast Asia, we are still, there is a need to catch up. That's the takeaway message. And number three, natural history collection institutions are not sufficiently supported. This slide, this next slide, is typical. It's a typical situation in many natural history institutions, not only in the Philippines. We found out, again, because we work with other scientists from other countries in Southeast Asia. It's the same thing when it comes to taking care of our natural history collections. The same thing is happening in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, Malaysia, and so on and so forth. And as I've said, we really must turn things around. There's a need to focus on this issue so that we can finally do something in terms of taking care of our natural history collection resources in the region. And I will be focusing on why there is a need to form a network of natural history collections in the region. Natural history collections are invaluable, right? Especially for you young people. They're an invaluable resource, and specimen-based research will continue to enrich knowledge of biodiversity, natural history conservation, and many other things. the role of natural history, especially now, is more important than ever before. Again, given the high rate of declining habitats, the destruction of habitats continue, not only in the region but outside of the region as well. And again, many of these ecosystems, these areas, still lack the basic biodiversity knowledge, basic biodiversity surveys, for example. And again, focusing on Southeast Asia and the ASEAN region, there's immense potential in utilizing such information, for global patterns. For example, studying the global patterns of climate change, or in zoonotic diseases. You can use natural history collections to do such studies. In fact, there are several papers, publications, looking at zoonosis based on studies of specimens that are found in Korean museums or in Japanese institutions as well, and of course in China. They look at specimens that were collected, 50 to 100 years ago, to look at the presence of diseases as well. Again, think of natural history collections as a library of knowledge. But the difference between a typical library, and the natural history collections is that books, for example, in a library, the stories are already written. We know that the stories are there. Just read them. But for specimens in natural history collections, especially you people who are studying these animals, these plants, you are the ones who will be writing, those books of knowledge. Again, the information you will generate, will contribute to the writing of each book of knowledge for each specimen. That's the main difference. That's how important natural history collections are. This is a recent post by the IUCN. You've heard of IUCN, of course not. And again, they emphasize the importance of natural history collections, especially in biodiversity conservation, because there are actually a lot of references out there, papers written about the importance of natural history collections. But we definitely need to make our case be heard to the policymakers, the government officials, not only in the region but outside as well. In a recent paper published in Science, for example, they looked at how such forming a network will really enrich global biodiversity knowledge, and I am pretty struck by this map that they included in their paper. There are no such networks, or attempt to create such networks in Southeast Asia. In Korea, you have such institutions that can contribute greatly to forming a global network. But forming a regional network in Southeast Asia of natural history museums, will be a great leap. Well, for one, many countries now actually have a good number of natural history collections. Like for example, Indonesia has nearly 6 million natural history specimens, followed by tiny Singapore, which has quite a good number of specimens, then Malaysia and the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, and so on and so forth. Again, all together, if you put this, all these specimens together, they will definitely, be, very important in terms of contributing to the global, knowledge, or enhancing global knowledge, of biodiversity. The ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, was established way back in 1967 on a philosophy of enlightened self-interest. Enlightened self-interest means acting to benefit others will ultimately serve your own interest. Right? So, and it will be great to, if the ASEAN, has a long history of forming networks, forming consortium and so on. What's only left is forming a natural history institution network. We don't have such a network in Southeast Asia yet. But again, there is really a need to do so. And through the AC with ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, our department, I have my colleagues there who did the initial legwork on this, establishing such a network. Many of the countries are actually very, they're very excited to form such a network in the region. And they have actually provided the encouragement to create such a network. We have contacted officials from this institution, from Brunei down to Vietnam, and many of them are actually, they do agree that there's an importance to create such a network. And we envision that the consortium will focus on not only on natural history specimens, but the associated data, for metadata analysis, for instance. And it will also serve as a venue for exchanging not only information, on biodiversity, on specimens, but also, another platform to exchange specimens, for example. And it will be a great platform for capacity building, the best practices and ideas that are being done in Singapore, Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum. For instance, if we share that kind of information to institutions in Vietnam or the Philippines, that will likely benefit many other institutions as well. And I am really excited on the prospect of doing collaborative work with fellow scientists from other countries. I can imagine scientists from Thailand or from Vietnam or Philippines studying limestone karst forest in Thailand or Vietnam and so on. Again, the main goals, just to summarize the idea of such a consortium, the main goals of the consortium, we actually have come up with a name for such a consortium. It's called ASEAN Big Net. Big Net, because it sounds like bagnet, and bagnet is a delicious pork, fried pork. Anyway, Big Net is Biodiversity Information Generators Network. And among the goals, the major goals are, number one, to conduct and sustain capacity building gatherings. There are a lot of efforts now being done in many institutions in the region anyway. Digitization, for instance. We can exchange ideas on how best to do it. People from scientists from Malaysia are doing it now on their own, as well as scientists from the Lee Kong Chian in Singapore and the National Museum of Natural History in the Philippines. We have we also need to engage with known institutions. The known bodies that are into this. For instance, IES2026. We have spoken with representatives from these institutions, and they are pretty much willing to assist the consortium if such a consortium is ever created. And societies like this, the Society for Preservation of Natural History Collection, either from the US or from Europe, are also willing to help. But of course, we definitely would need to learn more from them. But in the end, the region, Southeast Asian researchers and scientists would have to stand on their own feet to do these things together. Adopting a digitized interoperable format, the Darwin Core format, as it's called, especially doing so will enable member consortiums, consortium members of this network to be able to know what kinds of specimens, species, numbers of specimens are found among the member institutions, and that data sharing, format will be of tremendous help, especially if you're doing a regional study of, a certain species of flora or fauna. Again, imagine establishing a regional network of biocollections through open source platform, because such platform exists in North America. They call it the BirdNet. It will be great if we can have something like this in Southeast Asia. Now, finally, again, some of the most important things that we can do together, again, in forming such a network, is we will have the platform finally to assess the status of natural history collections in Southeast Asia. Again, nothing of such effort exists right now, and it will enable us to gather, not just like this gathering, like IES. It will be wonderful to see, natural history collection managers, researchers, scientists from these institutions to meet together, exchange ideas, network, and so on and so forth. And then again, I'm more excited. I'm really excited in doing collaborative work with field biologists from other countries in Southeast Asia. And doing such a network on a regional scope will likely revive current efforts on a national level. I know for a fact that in the Philippines, there are efforts to create such a network in this country. All right, last two slides. A network of natural history collections in the in the ASEAN region will foster collaboration, will enable the establishment of interoperable data structures, and it will provide a platform for sharing the best ideas and practices in terms of biocollection management and database management as well. And it will promote collaborative research on a regional scale. And finally, let me leave you with a quote from one of the greatest biodiversity scientists known. He died in 2021 during the pandemic. Let me just read the quote. So this is actually there's a story behind this. So he said that the hunt is also on for rare species that are already discovered but still effectively unknown. Again, E.O. Wilson is one of those scientists who are museum-based. He really worked on not only in the field. He was a field biologist, but he also worked on museum specimens, looking at ants. That was his specialization. Represented by one or two specimens placed in a museum drawer 50 or 100 years ago. This is a typical setting when you're working in a museum. With nothing but a locality and habitat note handwritten on tiny label. Unfold the stiff yellowing piece of paper, of course, but now we don't use much paper now. Everything's digitized now. If you're digitizing your collection, And a long dead biologist, I like this part. A long dead biologist speaks. I was there. I found this. Now you know. Now move on. And again, a national. Let me give you also a quote from a national scientist here in the Philippines. They were actually both Angel Alcala and E.O. Wilson were born in the same year. So, but Alcala died in 2023. So Alcala was 93, I guess. Yeah, 93. And E.O. Wilson was 91, not 91. So Alcala said, our future is only as good as what we make of the present. Right. And with that, thank you so much, ni Sheshe. And how do you say thank you in Korean?
감사합니다.
감사합니다. Thank you very much, Dr. Arvin DIESMOS, for that wonderful presentation. Let's proceed to our next